Hi, how's everyone doing? So excited to be back at Traction and in Vancouver again. It's one of my favorite cities in the world. So today I'm going to talk to you about culture. But to understand how we scaled our culture, I am going to tell you a little bit about our growth story and how we grew as a company. So let's start with an intro of myself and why am I doing this talk. My background is a little bit weird and a little bit varied. I've done engineering, I've done product. I built an app with my co-founders. It was a photo book printing app, and I'll tell you that story. And then we started Branch in 2014. Why do we talk about scaling culture? We're Branch today. We're over 300 people. We have 13 different offices. And actually scaling a team fast has been incredibly hard. But let's start with the story, and the story about how Branch actually came to be. And this story icon here is not actually an icon of a storybook. It's the icon of an app that we created in 2012. And it was a photo book printing app, and you basically could take your photos, put them into an app, reorder them, and then we would print this amazing photo book and send it to you. So, we started. We were first-time founders, and if anyone in the audience is starting a company, you know it's very hard. We were dreamers. We felt that we were going to put all our work, and so we worked this summer, and we launched this app, and we thought it was going to be amazing. And then we launched it, and we really thought that if we build it, they will come. We built it, and they didn't come. We had 10 users, and we're like, wow, this is really depressing. But then something really cool happened. We got featured in the app stores. And we started growing, and it was really cool. We really felt we were a rocket ship. And it was incredible. We felt like this was going to be a huge company. And then the features ended, and the rocket ship was not there anymore. And then we raised some money. Again, rocket ship, we spent all the money on Facebook ads. That's what I was doing. And it was cool. I learned a lot about growth. But we started trying to understand, are these users actually going to be profitable? And we realized that, again, they weren't, and we stopped spending money on ads. And then eventually we ended up getting not that many downloads and selling the app. But what was really interesting is that all this struggle built us together as a team and helped us understand what our values are and helped us put that into the future company, which was Branch. And then it also helped us understand how to build a company and a need that we would have never had otherwise. So we realized that actually, if you are in mobile, the most popular apps get actually so much more than the least popular apps. So it's very hard for an app to actually grow. So we built a mobile growth platform based on deep linking to help apps actually grow through sharing, referrals, taking people from your web into the app, and things like that. And then we grew to have a ton of different customers. We now have over 50,000. So why did I tell you this story? This is the story of our struggle, the story of how we came to be as a company. And what kept us together as founders in the early days was our shared values. And so then when we started Branch, we had those values, and when we had to actually scale a team, we used the values that came out of our struggle, and as I'll tell you some of them, you can see the tie-in to our early days. So when you think about building culture, number one, the first thing you have to do, and I think many companies do this way too late, is to start early and define your values. And sometimes I meet people, and they're like, we're 200 people, and we're defining our values now. If you're 200 people, it's too late. You have to define your values when you're 3 people in a room starting a company for the first time. And it's hard because there's so much going on. You don't think sitting around the room and defining values is important. You have a product. You have to find the market. You have to find investors. And yet, take that time, even if it's just an hour. This is our values, V1. I remember I pushed my co-founders to sit into a room and define what matters to us. And Abby, our employees, actually just wrote them down on a piece of paper. And they weren't, I mean, we put a frame around them, but they weren't in a frame then. We just like put them on top of there's still a coffee stain on them because we weren't like, all that matters is that we actually define them. And the other thing that's really important is that don't think that, wow, we're going to define our values and then we're done. Actually, you can define your values, and it's OK to evolve them. The core, the ethos of what you stand for should stand there. But as you start growing a team, as you start bringing more people in, as you start trying to understand who's your model employee, it's OK to actually evolve your values. So this is an example of our evolved values. I tried to find pictures of each evolution. But at the beginning, we used to call our customers partners because we weren't charging them. And we felt we were trying to change the mobile ecosystem together. And that became too confusing, so we started calling them customers. Initially, our values were very much around execution and ownership. And then we realized that we were starting to build a team that when you interview people, you have to look for certain categories, for certain things that someone has. And then what was that for us? We found that like what differentiated people at Branch was humility. And we added humility as a value. And when we added humility as a value, we had to make really tough decisions, meaning that we had a salesperson that was incredible, but he had a huge ego. He rubbed everyone the wrong way. And we had to let him go because he didn't fit with the humility. And that was a value that we actually put on paper. And we could use that value as a North Star to decide who we hire, who we fire, who we give promotions to, et cetera. The other thing that's really interesting is that I found this graph somewhere, and I think it's really interesting that actually, as you grow as a company, the willingness to change as a company goes down. So the bigger you become, the harder it is to implement change. And the values in your culture needs to, if you want to be the type of company that keeps changing, you have to bake that into your values, and you actually have to give people rewards and incentivize them to actually change, to be able to continue to do that as your company changes. Which takes me to number 3, which is this idea that you have to define your values, and you have to define what they mean, and then you have to use them to evaluate candidates and employees. So I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see is that people decide what their values are, and then they put them on a wall, they put them around the company, but they don't actually define what it means. So you see things like customers first, or dream big, or things like that. But like, what does it mean for me as an employee to know that I'm doing well on the dream big value, right? So we actually sat together in the very early days of Branch, and we sat together first as founders, and then we brought all our leadership team. And we actually came up with this super intense matrix that I don't expect you to read. But this matrix shows you what it means to be below acceptable, barely acceptable, doing well, and role model for each of the values. So it's super well defined. So when I say transparency is a value, what does it mean to actually be doing well on transparency? Well, it's part of it is sharing information, but part of it is giving feedback to others. And that's something that if you just see transparency on a wall, you might not actually understand what it means to be doing well. So then when we hire, when we think about promotions, we actually send this to all the managers, and we ask them to rate and rank people on the values. So for people to actually be eligible to get a promotion and move to the next level, move into a managerial position, their manager needs to prove to us and to the comp committee that that particular person actually does really well on all these values. And you'd be surprised that when someone has to go and think through that, sometimes they might actually promote people that they didn't think about promoting, or sometimes people that they thought about giving a promotion, they realize that they're not quite there yet because they don't actually do that well on our values. And we found that when people do well on the values at Branch, it's actually very highly correlated with also their job and functional performance as well. The other thing that I think is important in scaling, after you decide what your values are, after you define what it means to be successful, is to actually make sure that you propagate and people understand these values. And this is one of my favorite things, is actually weaving values into the stories that you tell as a company and at the space that you live in. So I have some examples about how we do it, but those are just our examples. And I'm sure if you sit down and you think about your values and your space and your stories, you can come up with much more creative examples yourselves. So this is an example of our partners first or customers first value. And some things that we did is the art around our office is not just random art, but it's art that's somehow connected to our customers. So an example is this photo mosaic of branches that one of our employees painted that we actually turned into a photo mosaic made with our customers' logos. Or the first art piece that we ever bought was actually a painting from the first customer, which was an art app. I remember going and finding 8 different paintings and getting people to vote. And everyone voted on this cool sci-fi painting that still is one of our most treasured pieces of art in our office. The other thing is also the way you think about your metrics. So for us, being customers first, when you think about our metrics of the company and about the way we talk about our success, it's not, oh, we increased so much revenue, things like that, but it's like, if we put customers first, the metric should be actually tied to their success. So in 2018, the metric that we hold ourselves accountable to and the metric that we reported was how much growth did we help our customers drive and how much did they increase in MAU. So this is one of the things that we were most proud of last year. The other one is, for us, is ownership. So this idea that you think about branch as your company, you own the space. So these are just examples of us actually building our own furniture. So building this like branch-shaped bookcase that sits in our office, or our boardroom table that's made out of redwood tree that we actually came on a weekend and we actually built together. Other things like fast iteration, like having posters and things around the office that remind you of that. So I remember my co-founder said randomly, if things don't feel out of control, you're not going fast enough, and we made a poster of it. Or my favorite poster is this life remaining zero. If you think about our idea and the place we came from, we were an app first, and we tried many things before actually getting to Branch. We had been working together for 2 years as founders. So when we started Branch, we really felt like it was our last life. So when you play a video game, and for those of you who play, when there's only one life remaining, you actually start playing a little bit differently. You are faster. It feels different, and that's how it felt at Branch. So we made a poster to remind us of that. Fast iteration also means that you shouldn't be scared of failure. And how do you make people think that failure is OK in a company, right? One is when they fail, you don't punish them. I think that people sometimes say, embrace failures, but wait, you deleted the database, you're fired. At Branches, you deleted the database, you're not fired. I mean, don't do it again. If you delete the database 3 times, then yes, probably you're fired. But that's not about failure. That's about the fact that you can learn from your mistakes. But it's really important. I think I've heard this complaint a lot, that you say fear of failure is OK, and then you punish people for failure. So we actually try to reward people for failure. And we have this thing where we have a lot of our names. We named our rooms after stories of failure. BNC.lt used to be our link names because we thought, you have a branch link, it's a branchlet, and it's cute. But everyone thought our links were super spammy because .lt is like a really spammy domain, and only we got it. And it was this really stupid name that we came up with. But we have a room that talks about that name and about what we learned from it. And now if you get a branch link, it's .app.link, and it's no longer looks spammy. We learned from it. But we had, our first name for branch was Epidemic, and it was during the Ebola outbreak, and it was not a good name. And we changed it fast enough. But basically, this shows us embracing our failures of founders, as early teams, talking about the failed photo book app. And I think this idea that new people coming in, and you wait to get into a room and you read the story of a failure and what you learn from it and why it's acceptable, helps people understand that their failures are going to be OK too, and it's OK to take risks and try. The other one that people talk a lot about, and I think it's been something that's actually very hard to scale, it's transparency. So the idea that we always share our board slides, how much money we have in the bank, fundraising plans, and things like that with the whole company. And it can be hard. Like, we have had things leak, and it was really uncomfortable when things like that happen. But this is an example of 2 years ago, we sat down with our investors on a weekend, and we came up with a 10-year plan of how we're going to grow way past IPO. And it's things that you would say, your really long-term strategy is not necessarily something that you want the world to know, but we shared it with all our employees at the time, because showing trust in your employees and showing transparency and people really understanding where you are, what are your challenges, what are your long-term plans, we think works really, really well. The other thing that's interesting is it's OK to do things that don't scale, but are important to do anyway. So we did many things that were super cool in the early days, and they just didn't scale. So here's an example of us eating lunch. My co-founder's fiance, Joanne, put this funny picture of what everyone was doing. So every day, we would all come together and eat lunch. Obviously, that didn't scale. And we've had offices where we couldn't even have people eat lunch together. But it was something that was important to us. So then, when we grew into a bigger office, we actually created a space where people could eat lunch together. But it obviously looks very different than it did in the early days. Other things that we did was we used to have people every Wednesday present, projects, and then the company got too big for that. So now we do it, but we do it at a team level. We have an engineering one, we have a marketing one. We used to do internal hackathons. Those didn't scale. Live department overviews. Again, those we had to break down by country and by department. We used to celebrate everyone's birthday, which was really awesome. But when you're over 300 people, it becomes very hard to do that because you have to celebrate a birthday every day. But managers still do this, and people still celebrate this within their own sub-teams. The other thing that's important, and I think this is something that many founders, early-stage founders, get wrong, is recognition. Recognition is incredibly important, and it needs to align with your values. You have to recognize people for doing things that are your values. So we have this thing called shout-outs, where everyone submits shout-outs, and Alex, my co-founder, only does the shout-outs that he feels fit into our values. And people sometimes get upset. Why didn't you say my shout-out for this person? And we still have other ways. We have channels and things where you can actually give awards to people and recognize people. But making sure that the big ones are in line with your values are incredibly important. This is just an example of things that we did to recognize people. We have this thing called value awards, where everyone in the company can submit people who are amazing at one value, and then we give them awards. And we come up with these really funny actual gifts, which are, I think these are cleaning supplies for the ownership award, and something quirky to let people know. They're not big fancy awards, but it's something to recognize who they are and the fact that they're doing really well in one area. And the other one is, in the early days, we used to cook breakfast on the Employee Appreciation Day. And now we have, we still do it, but we also have managers in all the local offices do it as well. And it's something it's a humble thing, and it kind of sits in line with our cumulative value. And lastly, the last one is invest in your employees' growth. This is a mistake that I think we made and many founders make. We did not start doing this early enough. We now do things like leadership training, and we should have done this earlier. It's amazing, and the way to see how managers grow through leadership training has been incredible. Getting coaches has been really, really awesome. thinking about ways that we can help our employees grow. One of the things we do is every new employee, we feel like the growth mindset is really in line with our values and this idea that fast iteration, always changing, always growing. And now we actually buy this book for every new employee. We work very hard to empower people to own things and make their own decisions, get advice and collaborate with others, but actually be the owner of a decision on their project. And then the other big thing that we do is try to allow people to move across departments. And that's very hard at the startup stage, but that's the best way to keep people. So that's about it. If you have any questions, if you look for ideas, if you have amazing ideas of ways you scaled your culture, I'd love to hear them and learn from you. So thank you so much. And I hope you got one interesting idea that you're going to implement in your own company, in your own culture. And yeah, thanks, and hope I get to see you in the networking after.
I need some traction. You need some traction. Let's get some traction.